Tonight, just a week after he was confirmed as Attorney General, Todd Blanche, Donald Trump's former personal attorney, says that his DOJ won't commit to being independent of the president. Joining Meet the Press yesterday, Blanche, who has transformed the department under Donald Trump, argued that a commitment to independence is impractical.
Can you pledge that the Justice Department will always act independently of the White House?
Well, there's a big difference between saying we will always do our job and investigate any case and act independently of the White House. No, I'm not going to pledge that, and no attorney general should ever pledge that. I will act with integrity. Our prosecutors will act with integrity. We will prosecute without fear or any sort of favor, and that's exactly what we've been doing.
So, Arthur, I think maybe in another world that might be an acceptable answer. I don't know, arguably. But in the context of a president who has specifically asked for prosecutions, it seems that what he is saying is, yeah, I might take orders from the White House on that.
Well, every president from Washington to today takes orders from the White House. Gives orders to the Attorney General regarding policy, regarding all kinds of things. I mean, the primary role of the Attorney General is to be the legal advisor to the President of the United States on federal law enforcement. There's supposed to be constant communication between somebody who's in the cabinet and the president. Now, the president is not supposed to say, hey, this guy didn't throw all my windows the right way in Trump Tower, so I want you to prosecute him. But I think what Todd Blanche has said, besides in that interview, is like, I'm not going to do anything I'm not supposed to do. But he'd be lying if he said, oh, I'm not going to talk to the president. And Abby, if you look at who have been the attorney generals, whether in recent history or in the past, they've always been people who are very, very close to the president. Campaign managers wind up being the attorney general of the United States. Brothers, like the Kennedy brothers. Well, I mean, the attorney general was involved in the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yeah,
that's not true.
Not always, but
Barack Obama were very close.
Merrick Garland had no relationship with.
Okay, that's
with
one.
with
Eric
Joe
Holder
Biden.
was very close with Barack Obama.
Reno had no relationship with Bill Clinton.
I said many. I didn't say
no,
every
but you said just about every one. So I'm just saying it's not true. But the truth is that the Attorney General is supposed to, like all DOJ officials, avoid the appearance of impropriety.
That's true.
He's failing that test horribly. I mean, we go back to Watergate. What happened in Watergate in the Saturday Night Massacre in 1973? Okay. The Attorney General was ordered by the president to fire the special prosecutor.
And he did it, and he resigned.
No, he refused. He refused and resigned.
And then the
deputy refused and resigned. Then the Solicitor General, Bob Bork, finally he did it. And that's
the problem. And then he didn't get confirmed to go on the Supreme Court of the United States.
And now we have a problem where the President of the United States, the guy who campaigned by saying that he was upset that Loretta Lynch met with Bill Clinton on the airport tarmac, is now trying to openly direct prosecutions from the White House. And he's okay with that, and you're okay with that, and the Republican Party is okay with that.
But Todd Blanche never said that.
But why didn't Todd Blanche say that we are not going to prosecute anyone where there's not evidence in order to do that, period? Why didn't he add that? I mean, that's an important addendum in terms of rule of law.
And you know why he didn't answer that way? Because he's Todd Blanche. And what he did was a very slippery tap shoe answer, dance around the question. Because the question was very specific. Are you going to act independently from the White House? And later on in the clip, what he actually said is, well, you're really asking me if I'm going to be independent from the White House, and I'm not going to say that because if Trump wants something done, Trump is the head of the executive branch, and the DOJ falls under the executive branch. There would have been a more dignified answer that Blanche could have provided. Instead, what he provided was, well, what I'm going to do is act with integrity, and I'm going to prosecute without fear or favor.
That's what he's supposed to say. That's his job.
It's a robot line because already, and I'm going to agree with you here, already Blanche has not acted with integrity. Blanche has not complied with the Epstein Files Transparency Act and has not released the additional more than 3 million documents that the congressional law requires him to do. He is not in compliance with the law. He also went down to visit Ghislaine Maxwell, a convicted felon, at her prison and threw her softball questions to make the president look better, to come back and report there's nothing to see here. So he hasn't really shown us integrity. But the good thing about him is he shows you who he is.
And
he's not hiding who he is.
Blanche says also Trump would never ask him to do anything illegal or unethical, and he already has, but with all the many indictments, but also with the slush fund. I mean, the federal judge really found that Blanche had colluded. The idea that the acting attorney general had colluded with the president of the United States to essentially defraud the court is a massive statement by a federal judge.
Let me just play. Well, this is what he said on Wednesday about that weaponization fund, and obviously, he now says it's dead, but he seems to agree with the premise, which is what the judges took issue with.
The president feels very strongly, as do I, that there were people who were victims of a Department of Justice that was absolutely weaponized. And he feels very strongly that he would want to make them whole, as do I. But it will not be through the anti-weaponization fund, which, again, was never set up, and nothing has happened with it.
You know what? I was going to say, I think it's going to be very interesting when James Comey goes to trial or has to deal with his case, because now we have we have James Comey being indicted for taking a picture of seashells on the beach that spelled out 8645 that someone else arranged. Now, Todd Blanche is pursuing that prosecution, and I think that we're going to really see if Todd Blanche has the same feeling towards those type of what looks like an extremely vindictive Trump-oriented prosecution as he does for the January 6ers or the other people who might be covered by weaponization.
The U.S. attorney in Washington, because Trump wanted them to, tried to prosecute someone for reaching into the reflecting pool and taking up a piece of the peeling liner. That actually happened. Like, that person was actually charged. So this is not actually hypothetical. The president wanted it and they acted on it.
Well, we may not like the way he answered the question, but he answered the question accurately and specifically. The Justice Manual, which I spent 30 minutes reading today, allows policy coordination between the DOJ and the president. That's allowed.
Sure.
The president, that is allowed.
Nobody disagrees with that.
I
It's not
don't
about
think
policy,
anybody agrees with that. I think that this is why I asked Stacey.
Well, that's the answer he gave.
No,
why
but
was
this is about
there? Why was
prosecution.
there?
It's not about policy.
Why was there not a comment, a point to be made about who gets prosecuted and who makes the decision on who gets prosecuted? That's, to me, that was what was missing. That's what what anybody would have wanted to hear from him is, hey, look, in this country, we have to have evidence to charge you, period, the end. Why didn't you say that?
But Abby, you brought up. Hold on.
He answered the question that was asked. I think he answered it.
Abby, you started talking about the Jeanine Pirro prosecution of the reflecting pool. Now, so what did she do? They made an immediate arrest, which happens here in New York all the time by the NYPD. And then when the prosecutors dug in, which Jeanine Pirro dug in, she dismissed the case. She's like, I got bad information from the people initially that authorized the arrest. Once I did my investigation, there's not enough here for proof beyond a reasonable doubt.
This is not a happy story, okay? This is not a happy story of them doing the right thing. They went to a grand jury and presented evidence that this guy violently
dismissed it.
But Donald Trump
the judge didn't dismiss it. The prosecutor dismissed it.
How do you even get to that point is the question a lot of Americans are asking themselves. And yes, they had no choice but to dismiss it, because they knew that if they went before a judge and they put that case, Arthur, that judge would have been pissed off. They would have been really, really mad.
Okay,
because it was a crap case.
Whether it was a crap case, and Jeanine Pirro said it was a crap case, and she dismissed it. Now, Trump wasn't happy about it.
Thank you.
And she said, but the witnesses told us X, and we went on X, and then when we cross-examined them, it wasn't.
To answer your question, he doesn't say it. He didn't say it because he can't. He's speaking to an audience of one, and Trump could not handle if he said he wasn't going to listen and do his bidding.
All right. Next for us, the panelists are going to react